Welcome to That Emotional Crap. I'm your host, Matthew Plotner. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what it means to be motivated, how we can train ourselves to be better disciplined, how we can motivate and discipline ourselves and make them work together, and how we can boost our motivation. All that coming up right after this. Hey everybody, welcome back. Okay, so today's episode has been one I've been kind of going back and forth on and how I'm going to do this and how I'm going to present it. And I'll be honest, I'm just going to give you guys this information only because I really think there's value in having and knowing how to not only what our motivation is, but how to get better with defining what is our motivation and how to approach discipline, right? Because all of those things are going to help us on this journey as we learn to overcome destructive emotions, or as we learn to overcome whatever mental health thing we've just learned we're dealing with, maybe, possibly, I don't know. We're going to see how this plays out. Anyway, let's begin. So let's start with a definition of motivation. This definition is one that I've kind of curated on my own, so to speak, just because I didn't like a lot of the ones I was finding. So the definition I want to use is: motivation is the will and strength to keep going despite any strong desire to quit. I love that definition, guys. It's hard to find motivation sometimes, right? Once we get to a point where, I don't know, I've been dealing with my own struggles with motivation, and I've came across this idea that motivation is actually a more prominent predictor of success than talent or pretty much any other thing that I could find. This was a study done by Dr. Anders Ericsson, and he's the one who coined the phrase, it takes 10 years and 10,000 hours to become an expert. I did some math because I was curious. How long in 10 years is 10,000 hours? Because it sounds like a lot, right? But really, it's only just over 41 days, right? Think about that. Over the course of 10 years, can you dedicate 10,000 hours or 41 days to your project, your growth, your change, yourself, your whatever, and become an expert in whatever it is that you're trying to understand, to learn? We can do that. That's not that bad, right? 41 days over 10 years. That's really not bad when you look at it. But we have to be driven by the right motivation. We have to know how to motivate ourselves in a way that's going to give us success. And there's 4 ways on this motivation matrix that I found that talks about how and what these styles of motivation are. So think of it as kind of I don't know how long you guys are out of school. I know for me, it's been quite some time. I graduated in 2000. So, but nonetheless, think of it as remember how you had the graph paper and you had the grid, right? You had the XY axis. Think of it that way. Think of your X axis as your positive or negative motivation. And then think of the Y axis as your internal, external motivation, right? And creates this 4-quadrant sort of space. And the idea is you want to be on a side of the matrix, this motivation matrix, that's going to give you the most success. So now let's examine what this motivation is. So in our first quadrant 1, if I remember how we drew our thing, don't quote me, but we're just going to call this quadrant 1. Quadrant 1. I can't talk today, y'all. I'm sorry. But this first quadrant is external negative motivators. These are fear of loss of job, for instance, or insufficient respect from others, financial or social pressure, maybe pressure from our significant others, or maybe just an unstable life can cause us to have these external negative motivations. And these are likely to lead to some success, right? You're going to see a little bit of success here, but you're not really going to see a high level of success. And you're also going to have a very high risk of a relapse into whatever it is you're trying to overcome. Next, we have external positive. Recognition and appreciation from others, financial rewards, prizes, things like that, things that we would look at as as a reward, right? Some kind of a reward. This is what we're talking about here. External reward, a gift, something external to yourself. These are going to cause some change. You're going to see change with this, but it's going to depend on others being able to continue this change, meaning you're going to always be relying on somebody else to reward you for your change. I don't know if that's the best way to go about trying to create the ideas and the changes and the things that we're supposed to be working on this podcast, right? You're never really going to build a lasting change by relying on others. So this external positive, it'll work. You'll get change with it, but it's not going to be lasting. It's going to be accompanied by a need for others to make your change lasting. We don't really want to focus on that. So let's look at another one. Let's look at quadrant 3. Internal negative. Threats, fear of failure, inadequacy, insecurity. These are what a lot of us use to motivate ourselves, right? We will call ourselves stupid or lazy or tell ourselves that we're never going to succeed or do all of these things that we would never tell another person, right? If somebody else was sitting in the room with us having this conversation about I don't have the motivation to do what I want to do or change the way I want to change or be the person that I want to be, you would never threaten that person or offer them any of these things you would give yourself as a motivator, right? But we do it all the time. And we think that this is the best approach because it does cause change. You're going to get change with this, but it's not going to be a lot. And it's going to be short-lived, really. Just like our external negative, these negative approaches to dealing with our motivation, they just aren't going to get us where we want to go. So let's look at internal positive. This is where we want to be. This quadrant 4, this is challenge, desire, passion, satisfaction, self-validation, right? These are all of the things that are going to help us on our journey to change. And the likely outcome here is successful change. You're going to be fulfilled. You're going to be glad you spent so much time in our quadrant 4. Let's apply this to our everyday self. Let's look at this a little deeper, right? There's this thing called fortitude or our strength of mind, right? And our strength of mind is way more important than raw aptitude or our natural ability. And there are 4 characteristics that can foster a fortitude or a strengthen stronger mind, to make our mind stronger. There's 4 things we want to look for in our life. I read this list the first time, guys, and this is hard, right? So number 1 is curiosity. We want to be curious about things around us. We want to have this innate desire to know more about the world around us. And I think a lot of us, especially if you're listening to this podcast, I know you already have that level. So you're good with the number 1 act, the number 1 characteristic for a stronger fortitude. Number 2 is a willingness to be vulnerable. That's terrible. To get a stronger mind, we have to be willing to be vulnerable. This keeps coming up, guys. It's going to keep coming up in this show. I promise you. This desire or this willingness to be vulnerable is paramount in any change coming from what we're working on. What about decisiveness and avoidance of complacency as number 3 characteristics for fortitude? This makes sense, right? We want to have a decisiveness. We want to have an avoidance of anything that's going to drive us to lazy. So we need to know where we're going and why we're going there. What is my desire for this change and why do I want to change it? And next, we got to have our number 4, a willingness to reach out to others to form support and collaborative relationships. Again, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have that level of fortitude and fostering that fortitude to begin with, because I like to think of this show as a family. Maybe not the best family in the world. We're all a little bit maybe messed up in the head. I know I am for sure. But it's a family nonetheless because we have got each other to lean on and for strength. How can we boost this motivation? What are some ways that we can boost motivation? Because now that we know its importance and we know that fortitude and our strength of our mind is more important than our natural ability. So how do we strengthen this motivation? How do we boost ourselves into better motivation techniques? There are 2 types of rewards. There's extrinsic or motivated by external factors, or intrinsic, motivated by internal factors. Again, this goes back to our what do we call it? The motivation matrix. This is a little bit more basic in the approach, but we're going to be looking more for those internal rewards. We want to focus on intrinsic rewards for lasting change. This makes sense because now Because now we're not relying on other people for our change. We're not relying on something that we don't have control over. We don't have control over the outside world, the world that is not internal to us. We do have control over our internal world, so to speak. Not completely, but more so than we do in the external world. Motivation is nothing and worthless without self-discipline. You got to have the ability to sit with discomfort and failures and even successes to not distract or deny ourselves in our pursuit of a goal. My definition, again, wasn't liking some of them that I found. So let's state that definition one more time for you. Our ability to sit with our discomfort, failures, and successes to not distract or deny ourselves in our pursuit of our goal. But how do we do that? We've got to find a way to build self-discipline. You got to start small steps. Start with one thing, one idea, one way. Think little when you start, right? Think very, very small steps. I'm going to work on drinking more water in a day. Small. I'm going to have one extra glass a day. Be willing to be uncomfortable. I know there's not really much discomfort in having one extra glass of water a day, but you know what I mean, right? Start small. Be willing to get out of your comfort zone. That's tough. I hate getting out of my comfort zone, guys. I've become so complacent and comfortable in my house since COVID that I hate getting out of the house. I hate getting out of my comfort zone. Right here behind this mic talking to you is probably the most I get out of my house and away from my own head. Next, we want to practice, fail, start over. Oh, scary, because it has that F word in there, that terrible 4-letter F word that we all hate, fail. You can't be afraid to fail if you're going to build motivation and self-discipline, because here's the thing, guys, you're going to fail. Just the way it is. We're all going to fail. That's something. If you're not failing, you're not trying. It's a quote from somebody. I don't remember where I heard it from, I'll be honest, but I love it. It's true. If you aren't failing, you're not trying. So go out there, fail again, and fail better. That is an amazing book I am currently reading by Pema Chodron, guys. I love it. It's great. Don't be afraid to fail. So go out there, build that self-discipline, build that motivation. Let's work together to overcome whatever it is you're dealing with in these negative, destructive, painful emotions. Or if you're dealing with, I am by no means a psychiatrist or a counselor or a therapist of any type. If you ever get that impression from me, please banish it from your mind. I am by no means that. But I am somebody who goes insane at learning everything I can. And this season, guys, I really think we're going to be focusing heavily on bipolar and some other things. Oh, and stay tuned, coming soon, we are going to be doing a series of metal meditations. Got a producer, a friend of mine, who's helping me with this. He's going to be creating different genres of metal-inspired music for meditations. I'm going to take the music that he's producing, and we're going to put a meditation over it of some kind. Nothing overly difficult. We're going to be focusing on just getting our mind clear on this first one, guys. So thanks so much for listening. I'm looking forward to talking to y'all again.